This is the World Innovators Podcast with your host, Donna Peterson.
I am so excited about this morning because I am going to talk about iOS 15 and the death of the open rate. We've all been hearing that and we're thinking, oh, what does that mean? What are we going to do with our email marketing and our marketing going forward? And so I'm lucky enough to be talking with Dennis Hecht. He is the Chief Intelligence Officer. I almost said Information Officer, but you're the Chief Intelligence Officer at Rooster. But before I get started, my name is Donna Peterson, and you are listening to the World Innovators Podcast, where I talk with business owners and marketing executives all over the world about their industry, marketing trends and techniques, and when new things pop up, just like this. And I had one client yesterday say it in an interesting way. He says, so Apple is trying to disrupt the Apple Cart. And I thought, well, that was kind of an interesting way of thinking about that. So let's jump in. Good morning, Dennis. How are you today?
Good morning, Donna. I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. And I thought you would be the perfect person to help us out. And, you know, I think we should tell everyone here, we have a panel discussion on October 22nd that is part of the MCMA, where we'll also be talking about this topic along with other audience development issues. And so if you enjoy this podcast, please join us.
Yes, please do. Yeah, really excited about that. Super thankful for you, Donna, for joining that discussion on October 22nd. And we'll be talking a lot about actionable audiences, which will certainly include the impact of iOS 15.
Yeah, and there's one other panelist, correct?
Yes, the other panelist is Kim Palmbush, and she is from Farm Journal Media. She's the Director of Data Operations there. So She'll be joining us as well.
Good. Gives a nice perspective of different people who are in different really types of companies, their viewpoint on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And actionable audiences, and our discussion today, even when it comes to iOS 15, is so much about the database itself and understanding the audience and their behaviors, and then how do you take action with it. So it'll be a great spectrum, and you certainly bring a great perspective to the table as well, especially as it relates to taking action.
Thank you. Well, that's good. So for everyone, what is iOS 15?
Yes. So iOS 15 is really Apple's attempt to continue what they've set out to do with iOS 14 when they implemented the restrictions around apps tracking data in the background. And so iOS 15 is their attempt to introduce what they're calling mail privacy protection. And mail privacy protection helps the users prevent the senders from knowing when they open an email. And then it also masks their IP address. So maybe in more simple terms, what that means is Apple Mail users have the opportunity to select to opt into mail privacy protection, which we know based on the app tracking protection that almost 100% of people will opt into that. Right. And then every mail received through Apple Mail will be returned as an open. And so essentially everyone's open rates will increase because instead of 20% of those emails being opened, 100% of those emails will now look as if they're being opened.
Interesting. So now with companies that might validate the success of their campaigns, which I have lots of those, they're always saying, where's the tracking? Because they want to see your number of opens and the number of clicks. And even though I tell them that is only a rough barometer of how a campaign is doing, because you have your back end and you have, there's always been a discrepancy really in the number of opens and the number of clicks. But do you feel that this Apple Mail, the iOS 15, is going to push companies maybe away from doing email marketing and go to other channels? Or what do you think on that?
I think it will be twofold. So I do think people will look to other channels. In particular, we've seen a lot of people shift to SMS, so just direct text messaging. There's certainly implications there with the data that you can collect back on a call to action as well, but it really focuses on the click, with the idea that we know that more people actually receive and open their text messages. People will also should look to more direct on-site web behavior as well, and really start to think about engagement as a whole. And that's where the other channels really come into play, is how can I really see my audience, who they are and who's actually taking action, and move away from the passive open on mail.
Yeah.
And I guess I say that to some extent, that seems to be the obvious answer. I think that people will struggle with leaving the open rate behind. And I see a lot of people putting pressure on people sending emails out to start to attempt to differentiate their Apple Mail user base from their non-Apple Mail user base, in an attempt to really just understand if they can decipher what the open rate metric means. So more scrutiny on open rate metrics, and certainly more channels at the same time.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question to you, because I've read several articles on the topic, and people said, well, get an idea of your percentage of Apple Mail users, because then you can take that percentage and then you can really work your open and click rates to be more accurate. And so obviously I was going to ask you, are companies going to start to do that? And do you think that is an accurate or a valid way to proceed?
That's a good question. So we're just digging into some of that data now. What is been traditionally easier to do is see where people are opening their emails. So we can see if they're opening it on their iOS phone or MacBook or iPad.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean that they're an Apple Mail user, because if you're using Gmail through the Apple Mail app, this privacy protection doesn't apply to you, because that still runs through the Google platform. So really trying to decipher if the mail is coming through the Apple Mail platform itself, I think is going to be a lot harder to identify, but we're trying to figure out if there's some data that could be returned there to differentiate those data sets, or at least maybe where we're seeing it open on iOS versus not on iOS, we could even just use that as a baseline. And then really you start to deliver two sets of KPI reports or two sets of dashboards. And then you can have an honest discussion about, what does this mean and what does this not mean? And it's almost an opportunity to have a really good educational conversation with the client and say, what are we really trying to do with our email marketing program? And have a deeper conversation about what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think you're reading my mind, because I read all the articles on this, and some people are so up in arms and they're really upset, and But part of me feels that this is what's going to maybe push people to do exactly what you just said. Let's sit back. Let's concentrate on us. What are you trying to achieve? What is your objective? Then that really knowing, and I always say understanding your target audience, because just like you said, get an idea. Do you understand? Do they respond to us via the phone? Are they on an iPad? Are they on a desktop? What device are they using? Mm-hmm. And then, if you understand and know your audience, then you'll also know what type of content to deliver them, and so,
right.
Yeah, because then if you offer value to the people, let's say you don't have that open number anymore to concentrate on. But if we know a good, appropriate content is going to that target audience, there's some great branding taking place there. You gotta, people discount, I'll have those clients all the time who do they'll set up the board and I think, okay, Donna, we did this many emails and this is how many clicks we got and this is how many sales we got. And I'll be like, yeah, I get that. And what about the branding? And they're like, I don't care about the branding. And I'm just like, what do you mean we don't care about the branding?
Right. We need to care about the branding, and it will really drive that conversation in that aspect around the branding and the behavioral impact that we're having with the brand. And I think you're saying this too, which is like the more personal the brand can be, the more we don't even have to look at the open rate, because the content will be resonating, and then we can look to clicks and purchases and those types of metrics as well.
It's all going to go back to quality, not quantity. And if you're doing quality, then you're going to get that quality result. And to your other point, yes, especially since COVID, and I work more in the B2B space, it's all about building a relationship now. I think you and I have had that discussion before about the value of a relationship and getting someone to, open and click.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Every interaction is extremely important in building and fostering and continuing that relationship. And that needs to be built on the meaningful content and the meaningful value exchange. And one of the biggest things that I think companies need to pay attention to right now, since iOS 15 is live, is look at your marketing automation and your nurture campaigns, because all of a sudden, starting Monday, you could be pushing people through an experience that isn't actually happening if it's based solely on open rate triggers. So just paying attention to that relationship that you're building and waiting and understanding the meaning behind those interactions will be really important.
Yeah, and I would find it to be important because if you end up taking, let's say, Tom Jones, you think he opened your email, but he didn't, and you start pushing him down one path. To me, when that happens to me, I unsubscribe, because I'm like, obviously they're not paying attention to what I'm doing.
Yes.
And they're not really being authentic. It's, I don't know if you ever get those emails where someone says, oh, I'm following up to the conversation we had the other day. And I don't know whether they think I'm senile or something.
Right.
I'm like, we didn't have a conversation the other day.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. Or yeah, thanks for joining that webinar and watching. And I'm excited to follow up. And oh, by the way, I didn't actually log into the webinar. If you would have looked at the data, I was following up on demand a few days later.
I heard of someone who said they had someone who said, oh, I'm following up from the trade show when you stopped by the booth.
Right.
Didn't even go to the trade show.
Oh my goodness.
That is so wrong in so many ways, but I'm really hoping maybe that is what's going to push companies to stop doing, I guess that's your clickbait, the clickbait they always put out there that they're following up, or it's some continuation of a conversation we already had, which
didn't happen. Yeah. Yeah, you really, I think there will be, there'll be potentially some massive unsubscribe movements happening, especially if people are, and I have clients sending still like one email to the whole database, and we're not even treating people in different industries or with different titles differently.
Really? Yeah, I spoke with Joanne at One Count. I think you know her also. And we were talking about that, where companies are still, they're either keeping their information in totally separate silos, or they're all grouped in one big pot. And her and I were talking about an association where they have professionals, but they have students, and they don't separate it. So even though they might be going to an offer for students, it gets sent out to the whole list. So of course, those professionals, after a while, they're going to be, unsubscribe me. Obviously, I'm a member of yours and you don't even know me. So I don't know. People have to really take the time now and get their databases appended with all the appropriate information. So then you can segment it into different pools.
Yeah, absolutely. And work with really great partners, such as World Innovators or other companies in my role today, playing a little bit in the agency consulting space between clients and publishers or clients and other data providers. We're really looking for data providers that are focused on helping clients build a first party data strategy so that they can reduce some of their reliance on those providers long term, or at least have a data sharing connection between the two partners where we can both be working towards the same goals. And so I think this will kind of play out on both sides.
Yeah, there's this saying, I don't know who says it, you almost have to give more than you expect to receive. And I'm all about, especially now, I don't know what the big turn was in my life. Maybe it's because I'm so sick of all these generic emails that I'm getting, or people saying, oh, you want a list? I have a list of this, this, and this. And then I call them and I'm saying, is it opted in? And they don't even know what I'm talking about. And I'm like, okay, nope, it's time to get vocal about quality marketing. And that's how I got on this podcast bandwagon of mine.
Love it. Yes. Consented, opted in marketing. That will be the future. Yes.
It is. And then, like we talked about with this iOS 15 and Apple Mail, and maybe death of the open rate, or not having as much confidence, let's say, in your open rate, because even if you put in different percentages, there's always going to be that thing in the back of your mind of, is this really the open rate, or where is it? But if you can concentrate on segmenting your file, like you just said, some of your clients are going so broad, segment it so you can send them information that's of value to those people. That's where marketing, or I like to now call it relationship building, is going. I think that's where it's going in the future. And that's really where you have to be as a brand. You have to be doing that.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, you and I even had a discussion just about the emotion that needs to take place within that relationship building process, because that's where you need to resonate with people and have your brand create that emotion that feels the appropriate moment in time where someone is making a decision and can think about your brand and can be quickly reminded of that relationship that you've built And hopefully that will encourage them to take the next step at the right time.
Yeah. I tell clients, we have people who talk about buyer persona or target audience or, customers. And I say, I like to think about your ideal client, because your ideal client is that customer who buys from you regularly. And so they're like your ideal client who, in most cases, you do have some deep relationship with, and there's some emotion to that. We all buy on emotion, like you said.
Right.
Even on the B2B space, they're buying on emotion because there's an individual there. And if they can have a relationship and have trust, with a brand, they're going to buy from them.
That's right. That's exactly right. Absolutely.
And so when you talk to your clients about, segmenting their files, what's their pushback? Like, why don't they want to do that at this point?
That's a really good question. It's always easier said than done is probably as simple as it gets. I think it's always easier to write one message than to write 3 or 4 messages. And it does take a little more effort to curate that content or tailor that content to one message or more messages. I think that's always been the pushback. I was actually on a call yesterday where it was, let's do some behavioral targeting and think about crafting different messages. And it was, well, we don't want to make 4 messages. We just want to use one. Mm-hmm. And sometimes an easier way to think about that, or in sort of an out to justify the end to the means, if you will, is send one message, but then evaluate it on 4 personas. If you're not going to send 4 messages and then evaluate it 4 times because you're not sure the juice is worth the squeeze, maybe send one message, but then evaluate it in 4 different ways and see where the gaps are and where the opportunities are and where your strengths are. And maybe think about it that way. So maybe think about it more on the reporting side to justify the content creation side, if that's a struggle. At least that's what I'm hearing.
That's a good idea. If they say, oh, we don't want to take the effort, then at least try to segment the file to track it differently so you can analyze the different segments on, the same piece of content, and then decide how you want to do it. I just like you, I get pushback all the time because companies want to do it. I like to say fast and furious sometimes. We want to get our marketing out there. And, World Innovators, we're guilty of that. When we first started, it was, well, as any business owner, you want as many customers or clients as possible. It's like, yes, bring it.
Come.
I don't care what you are. I don't care what you do. And, I've learned over the years that to specialize, you have to be brave and strong to specialize, because there's going to be times when you have to say no. And even though our company's been here for 41 years and I've been doing this for over 30 years, still to this day, when I have to say, I'm sorry, I can't help you, it kind of hurts. It's
so hard.
It is so hard because I want to help you, but really in the end, it's going to take way too much time on my end, but also for them, they're not getting the expert in that field. So they'd be better off going to the company that's an expert in that field that they need help with. And so you have to think about how are you helping them, and will it be a service or a disservice really to work with them? And so, but
right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was doing some reading last week about saying no, and that it goes almost against the identities of who we are for those of us who care so much, but that objectively trying to think about it the other way might help us practice, those of us who love to help and say yes, saying, you know, here's an expert, and you know, they can jump in and help you. So
I'm gonna have to keep practicing that. But I think today I think we're both in agreement that we definitely feel brands have to go back to quality marketing, researching their audiences, so that this iOS 15 or the questionable open rates that we might be getting won't bother us as much, because we know we're doing the right thing towards the right people.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I agree wholeheartedly. There'll be a closer look at who the audience is. Are they the right people? And is the message resonating? And the message either should be resonating, one, because it's the right audience, or two, we don't understand the audience as well as we thought we did, and we can make some adjustments on the messaging side, and then we should see the engagement and other components continue to increase.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so I think maybe this could be a good thing. I think it might be a little bit of a wake-up call for some brands. And hopefully, if our listeners, I hope they enjoyed what we were talking about today, but they should listen in to our panel on October 22nd. It's the MCMA. And the title, again, is, I'm going to leave it up to you, Dennis, because I always mess it up.
The title is Building the Foundation of Actionable Audiences. And yes, really understanding what an actionable audience is. And so much of it ties into this conversation, and looking forward to discussing this, but also so many of the other components as well.
Oh, good. Well, thank you very much for taking the time today to discuss this topic that is so hot right now.
Yes.
And I look forward to our panel discussion on October 22nd.
Wonderful. Thank you, Donna. I appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the World Innovators Podcast. For more information about today's topic, email us at dpeterson@worldinnovators.com or call 860-210-8088. And please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a future episode.